Welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors. Dr. Allen chats with successful investors exploring their journey from setback to triumph. Through this window, we glimpse the truths that inspire our guests to invest abundantly and flourish in all areas of life. And now your host, Dr. Allen.
Welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. Today's guest is an active duty Marine and has realized that service members and the working class use the phrase, "I don't get paid enough," entirely too often. The reality is that most often our financial situation is self-inflicted. After having success with real estate investing, he started from military to millionaire to teach professional finance and real estate investing to service members and the working class. As a result, he has helped many of his readers increase their savings gap, purchase real estate, and increase their chances for financial freedom. Welcome, David Pere.
Thank you for having me back on our show, David. I'm so glad that you could be back with us to get more into your story here. So just kind of recapping, we talked about a number of various different things. For one thing, I was extraordinarily impressed with not so much you, but your dad's parenting skills. You had a great dad. All of us as parents strive to be good parents, but I think you had a remarkably wonderful dad there. He did some things that most of us would never even have thought of doing there. And we were talking about many other things, but we ended up talking about a huge setback in your real estate investing career and in your finances, and how devastating and disappointing that was and had to be. The things that you had mentioned, and I appreciated your courage in actually talking about them, I think are things that all of us are afflicted with when we come to disappointments like that. You were talking about asking yourself these negative questions. Am I able to do this? Did I cause this? Should I even be in real estate investing? And talking particularly about the imposter complex that you had to deal with there. And you touched on those, and we could go into those deeper, but the one thing that you said that actually pulled you out of it, well, there were actually two things. One was that you were able to tell yourself that all successful people have had to deal with failures, and the only real failures in life are those who quit. And as long as you keep coming back, you're not a failure. But the thing you said that really pulled you back was that you had your eye on the big why. And so that's what I want to talk about today. What is that big why that actually ultimately pulled you back from that very dark precipice?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's funny because I think people think of like the why as like this thing that you find and then your whole life is solved if you follow that. But I have found that my why seems to morph over time, and whether that gets more specific or more general, or so at this point in my life, I would say that the why is kind of twofold. I mean, there's obviously the part where I want to be able to travel the world and spend more time with my wife, my kids, and family. But I think more of my purpose in life is helping other service members and veterans avoid a lot of the financial pitfalls that I fell into to set themselves up for success. And I think the reason that helps pull you forward is, like in my situation, I kind of frame things as like, well, if I let this stop me, if this finishes whatever I was trying to accomplish, then like I wasn't an example at all. I mean, obviously, like if I let something crush me, then, not only am I letting it crush me, but I'm letting it crush essentially anyone who followed me as an example of what to or not to do. And I think that's a pretty big motivator, but also the fact that if you, I don't know, I mean, it just kind of gives you, it's almost like, is it Friedrich Nietzsche? He who has a why can endure almost, or can bear almost any how. I think it's just understanding that I'm trying to work towards something that's bigger than, myself, which is a lot of what the military has ingrained. A lot of people join the military because it's joining something that's a bigger cause. And I think if you kind of create a cause like that for yourself, then it's just going to make things, I won't say that it makes things easier, but it's kind of easy to frame and put in perspective as you step back. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not easy to get back on the horse when you really botch something, but I think it's easier when you've got people cheering you on or depending on you or watching you. I guess it's the old, like when people talk about when their kid is watching something, and it's like all of a sudden the fact that their kid is watching gives them new strength or new, I'm sure there's countless of examples of that, but it's kind of that. I mean, shoot, you could probably tie that into anything. When you're a young kid and your girlfriend's watching you and you go way too hard at a sport or something, trying to show off. It's probably that inner peace. Like, who am I to let these people down? Is a pretty important motivational factor.
That is good to have those things in our lives that are outside of us like that. In fact, without them, we probably all would just sit back and say enough is enough, particularly when encountering difficult and challenging situations like that. One other thing that you had mentioned in talking about this dilemma is that your wife, Lindsay, is her name? Is that correct?
Kimberly.
Kimberly. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, it's fine. I don't know that we actually ever mentioned that. So
maybe not. I think it was on your website. I think I saw her name. So Kimberly you had said that she had just sat down in the living room one day and she had said that you have got to cut this off and get out of this because I just cannot continue to deal with you in this situation. Tell us about that. I can't imagine that was easy to hear, and probably not easy to just suddenly take in and say, okay, Kimberly, whatever you say.
Yeah, I think the conversation went, I'd like to think that it was probably a little bit gentler than that. I think maybe the internals of how I communicate maybe makes that sound a little bit more brash than it probably was, but that's how I take things. If someone says, oh, you're not doing very good at this, I take it as like, oh man, you suck. You got to get better at this. That's just how I internalize things. Cause that's kind of how I motivate myself. But, her ultimate point when we were debating back and forth was, look, like, you're miserable during every interaction with this. You have been stressed. You've been pulling your hair out. You have not been in a good mood and you haven't been able to enjoy things. Like, screw the money. You need to pull out of this deal because you're going insane. Like, this is not worth it. And that's a really powerful insight, especially as a young investor while you're trying to grow something, is the idea that, like, it's not the money that matters. Ultimately, all the money in the world is great, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you can't enjoy your life along the way. And I think that's kind of something I try to live my life by these days, is like, okay, great. Yeah, I'm doing this, but I got to enjoy myself while I'm doing it. So many people get to the end of their life and then okay, it's time to relax. I'd rather have been able to enjoy myself along the way. So no, it was not an easy thing to hear. It was what I needed to hear. And I was already debating, going back and forth, like, do I stay in this? How do I get out of this? What are we doing here? Do I go to a lawsuit? Like, none of these are good answers. And I think ultimately the answer was, look, if you exit this deal and you go into a lawsuit, then, that at least will give you potentially the peace of mind one way or another. Whereas if I had stayed in that deal, I didn't see a way out. So I don't know. In fact, since I exited that deal, the exact same thing happened to somebody who jumped into it after me. So I kind of feel like it was a bit of a kind of a scam operation type thing. So ultimately, looking back a year and a half later, we haven't even made it to court yet. And I can tell you without a doubt, this has been the best decision, because it is still frustrating, but the stress is gone. At this point, it's a phone call with a lawyer once a month to figure out how things are going. And there's legal counsel, and I'm essentially being told that I did things the right way for, obviously there was mistakes, but the legal counsel is saying I made the right decision. I mean, it's super stressful, but it's like a once in a month, here's a phone call, we're stressing about something, instead of every single day this thing is just ruining or running my life. And I think that really just points to the idea, there's this concept, don't throw good money at bad. The idea that once you start losing money, people will inherently say like, well, I've already spent $10,000 on this truck and it broke down, so now I should spend another $1,000 to fix it. Well, now I've spent 11, so now I should spend another $1,500 to fix it. Well, now I spent 12,500, so I should. And like at some point, it just becomes worth saying, look, that money's gone. I'm not recouping that money. Don't keep throwing other money at it. And it's not an easy lesson to learn, especially as a Marine who generally is not the okay, yeah, you're right, I should just give up type, which is kind of worked in my favor, I think, with all the legal stuff, because the other guy keeps thinking I'm going to just quit. And I'm like, yeah, nope. I'm gonna see this through. But yeah, anyway, definitely a hard pill to swallow to be told like you're a miserable sack and you got to get out of this because like you're just not tolerable right now.
Well, a terrible experience for any investor, particularly a young investor like yourself. But I expect as the years go by, you will look back upon this experience and go, that was one of the best experiences of my life because of all the multiple lessons you have learned from that. So going forward here, talk to us about the way in particular that you are helping military personnel and the working class to find their way out of this trap of financial insecurity.
Well, it started with me just documenting everything I was doing. So I started a blog and I started writing about what I was doing, what seemed like it was working, what didn't. And over time that grew into a podcast, a YouTube channel. There's a Facebook group, Instagram, I've got all the social platforms and they've grown, I mean, fairly well. I have, I'm not by any means Insta famous or anything, but I've got, tens of thousands of followers here or there. And I think a large piece of that is that I've remained in the documenting, not selling mentality. So I have a small course, but that's not where I make my income. In fact, I joke that I'm undercutting the real estate course world because my course is so affordable that, anybody and their mother could pay for my course 1 million times over before they buy some of these people's programs. And it's got just as much content. That's not what my goal is, not to make money by selling people stuff. My goal is to produce a ton of content, answer as many questions as possible, and ultimately just be able to show people this is what I'm doing. And I think the transparency, there's a lot of people online who talk about their wins and don't ever mention their losses. And everyone on my platform that follows along knows about this and knows about my hits. And I haven't been able to talk about this deal in full detail yet because I'm still in the legal process, but I've been very transparent about everything. And I'll tell people, hey, today I am just not feeling it, but I'm going to try to do this anyway. And I think that's a huge portion, is that I'm a real person online, and a lot of people focus more on the sale. So my goal with everything though is, if I show people what I'm doing and I show people the wins and show people the losses, and I'm able to, people can reach out and ask me questions, then that alone will help. But as I grow the community, I'm in the middle of a first draft on a book, and various other things to just reach more people. The goal is to just be able to, probably my best content strategy has been when people ask me a question and I get that same question multiple times, and that's what I write about. And that's what I make a video about. So I've just kind of tried to create this hub where I have a start here page where you can go in and see like how you do all the different steps to get started in real estate on my blog. But then also, if you were to go online and need to figure out if you should refinance your house, I have an article and a video about that because people were asking about that. So I guess that's kind of how I do some coaching call stuff. I tried to do like a whole coaching program, but there was just no way that I did a beta test with it, and there was absolutely no way that I could maintain that while still active duty. That was just totally unrealistic, totally zapped all my time. So that got put on hold. So then I did the course so that I'd have an affordable way to just, if somebody wanted more structure. But the biggest way is by creating a community where people can come together, like my Facebook group, and ask questions and help each other. And I can moderate it and answer questions and stuff like that. Just creating places where people are open to talking about finances and not spamming or selling. Or, I mean, every single day I'm blocking someone from my group if they're too spammy or trying to sell stuff, and try to keep it as just as transparent as possible, which is probably the one thing I think that people like about me more than others, is that I'm try to be as authentic as I can, which is easier said than done. But
Well, that's what I've enjoyed about our conversations. You are very authentic. I really appreciate that. So guests just tuning in, to my guest today is David Pere. He is an active duty service man in the Marine Corps, and he is a real estate investor and a mentor to a lot of other service men and women. One other question here. You were just sharing how it is that you are sharing. How is it that you, as a military person, found the avenue of real estate investing as a means to develop your personal wealth?
in probably September or October of 2015, somebody handed me the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is actually right up there behind me, by Robert Kiyosaki, which is one of those books a lot of people talk about. And it's funny, I remember telling him I don't read, and the guy literally pulled a CD out of his pocket and was like, well, here, you can listen to it on audio while you drive. And I was a recruiter, so I had a lot of time in the car. So I kind of took it. It wasn't even as a challenge. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy called my bluff. Fine, I'll listen to a stupid book. And yeah, I finished that book. My eyes were just totally opened. I'd always had kind of an entrepreneurial bug, but I had never had any guidance on what to do with that. I usually, my mom actually jokes that when I was like 6 years old, I made like a cat of nine tails and tried to sell it to the neighbors as like custom whips. We were in the South, so a whip is kind of a normal thing, I guess. But yeah. Anyway, so I think I always had kind of an entrepreneurial vibe in there, but that book really set it off. I finished that. I started reading other books from him, other books from Bigger Pockets, and then one thing led to the next. And somewhere, I don't know, I can't figure out when I finished that book. There's just no way for me to remember the date that I finished that book, but December 28th of that year, I closed on my first property. So less than 4 months, probably like around 3 months after I read that book, I bought a duplex. It was like the stars aligned. I was having to decide if I was going to renew my apartment or not. At the same time, I found this duplex that worked. So I moved into the duplex on one side and rented the other side. And I was hooked. Things from there just kind of, I don't know that I would say they took off. It wasn't like a rocket ship, but they just kept rolling. And it's just slowly growing every month.
Interesting story. Many of the people I talk to, they've either had parents who were entrepreneurial, and so they had that, that childhood experience, or many of the people I talk to just had that entrepreneurial talent, which amazes me because I certainly don't have it. But I mean, as children, they were selling candy to their classmates, or they were mowing the neighbors' lawns, or they were washing windows for neighbors, and they had businesses by the time they were adolescents. But all of us, many of us just haven't had that kind of background experience. But you've certainly done well stepping into that. And as we look at an overall life, I'm impressed with the fact that as new as you are to investing, and you clearly have this bug to develop your wealth, and yet you have not allowed it to consume your life. As you were talking about your discussion with Kimberly, you had realized that money's one thing, but I'm going to enjoy my life while developing that wealth. So you didn't allow this to consume you. What do you attribute that insight, that ability to?
That's actually a really good question. I don't necessarily know where I attribute that to, other than having watched some people that I look up to and how they live their life. So I have a friend, Brandon, who is very successful in the real estate world. He's done very well for himself there. He's got a platform, and he's, by all means, from the outside, he's extremely successful. But what I always thought was the most interesting thing about him was when I would see him or hang out with his house or whatever, and he had like the work-life thing figured out. People say you can't find a work-life balance, but he had figured out how to. He's probably the closest representation of the 4-hour work week that I've ever found, where he could legitimately spend, 3 or 4 hours a day and still accomplish more than most people, because he doesn't get distracted by his phone, which I'm guilty of. He just has a very, very good balance. And I think I just always remembered looking at what they were doing, and a few of my other friends, and just saying, who would I rather be? Would I rather be worth $100 million and not stop moving until I'm 60? Or would I rather be, maybe I have a few million, maybe I don't, but have enough cash flow that I can say, hey, I'm going to go on vacation for a week and not have to worry about it. So I think it's funny, as we talk about all this, one of the things I've been wrestling with lately is that my sense of adventure feels like it is just gone. Like the military is incredible and there's a lot of adventures there, but a lot of stuff's died down over the last few years, and I've got promoted enough that I spend a lot more time in the office. And one of the things I've been wrestling with is, especially because I'm reading the book Wild at Heart right now, which has just been a total gut check for me, is that I am not getting out and doing enough adventuresome stuff or exciting stuff in my own life. And so I'm actively trying to plan, okay, how can I go to a cabin here with some guys? Where can maybe it's not hunting, but where can I go hiking in the wilderness? Maybe it's to the point where if I really, really get to a point, I'm like, man, I'm going to go jump out of an airplane somewhere to, it's funny because I can feel things creeping up when I don't. It's almost like a domesticated feeling, but when I'm not out doing those kinds of things, or at least something working out or something to really live life, I can feel it. It's like it's just deep down in your soul. You just don't feel alive. And so I'm having to go out of my way to make that stuff happen. And so it's definitely a balance, because I am kind of a workaholic, but trying to remind myself that I need to be willing to take a vacation or do whatever that thing is to spend time with the people who matter now. Because I mean, it's not the norm, but there are plenty of people who retire and die within a year or two. And I don't want to be that guy. Like, I made all this stuff happen. I worked all this stuff out, and now what? Like, I don't have anything to show for it, or I didn't get to enjoy it. So I figure try to enjoy that while I can.
I was just talking to a veteran investor earlier today, and he touched on this just a tad bit, and he said that work and life balance is an absolute myth, and what he was saying is that what he strives for is work-life integration, and it sounds to me like that's exactly the path that you're on, is that that we're integrating what is compelling about your life with your career there, so that the two are working with each other instead of opposition with each other. I like you pointing out the aspect of looking for adventure in your life, and that's something I need to get back into myself. I can't remember the last time I was on an adventure. And so thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to add that to my list of things to do here. We're coming to the end of our show. So, David, share with our listeners and viewers how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, the best way is probably through Instagram at From Military to Millionaire. But if you Google Military to Millionaire, I'll pop right up. And I have a website, YouTube, podcast. It's all right there.
Thank you, David, for being on the program. You are an inspiration to many of us. So keep on doing what you're doing. And thanks for being on the program.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Thank you for tuning in to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. Steed Talker Capital works with both new and established investors nationwide, creating opportunities to flourish in all areas of life. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. For resources to enhance your well-being through multifamily real estate investment, connect with us online at capital.steedtalker.com.